everybody. Welcome back to another podcast of The Free Agent. Bo Billington here, and I've got Michael Yinger. Michael, thanks for joining.
Hi, Bo. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, no, so this is a topic that's really like near and dear to my heart, right? It's about the employee experience. It's about, creating efficiencies in the recruiting process. And candidly, it's really, I would imagine this is quite topical considering the times that we're in. So I really appreciate you joining and kind of sharing your mind and sharing your time with the audience here.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is timely, and happy to be part of the conversation.
Excellent. So prior to jumping in, we'll just do a quick bio. So Michael's the founder and principal of Customer Solutions, a consultancy focused on issues in the HR and talent acquisition space. Whether strategy, recruitment planning, or devising the right tech stack, Customer Solutions can provide the advice you need to drive your company forward. So how long have you been the principal at Customer Solutions?
It's going on 21 years. I've had the company. There have been times when it's been quiet because I've taken a full-time job, but I've had the company for 21 years.
Excellent. And so have you always been in that recruiting space? Is this something kind of new for, kind of your consultancy?
My consultancy was founded as I was coming out of the tech consulting space and the tech bubble. So 2002, the tech bubble burst. Company I was working for cratered pretty hard, and I started my own company, and I did some initial consulting, ironically in pharma, and then I picked up a consulting gig in the talent acquisition space. And within a couple of years, that was my main focus. And so I built into it slowly, but I became pretty dedicated based on the kind of clients I was getting. And then finally, as I said, I've had times when I've taken off from the company because one of my largest clients said to me, we really like you, and you can't be a consultant anymore. You have to come work for us. And so I said yes and did that for a while, and then have in the last couple of years gotten the consultancy back up and running as an alternative during the COVID times.
Sure. Understood. No, I could completely relate. And I sometimes refer to folks as like, reluctant consultants or reluctant
Yeah.
entrepreneurs where maybe some sort of, life situation occurred, or maybe it was just kind of burned out, disenfranchised, tired to get out of corporate America. So you start your own thing. But regardless, really appreciate you coming on. So listen, so are you kind of like all things HR? Are you specific to like maybe talent acquisition? Like tell us a little bit about kind of your focus areas and
Yeah.
your expertise.
Yeah, my particular focus is talent acquisition. I have worked in virtually every role across talent acquisition on the external side. I haven't been internal, like working for a company. Sales, strategy, implementation, client delivery, product management, the whole gamut of things. So I have a very broad view of talent acquisition. Most of the work that I do tends to be, so people think talent acquisition, that means you help hire people. Well, yes, except that no, I'm not a headhunter. I have helped people hire. Mostly what I do is I help people figure out how they should be hiring. What process should they be using? What kind of tools should they be using? What results should they expect from their talent acquisition process? Because it all too often, particularly as companies are growing early in their life cycle and then as they grow, talent acquisition is a necessity, of course, and how they do it is something they don't think about. They just start doing it. They post a job and they just start hiring people, and all of a sudden it's, might be chaos. I talked to a CEO the other day, and I said to him, when did you decide that you needed professional, full-time help with hiring? He said, when I had 13 interviews in 1 week and I realized I was spending 40 hours a week
Yeah.
on recruiting as
Right.
the CEO. Yeah, well, okay, good. And so, he at that point he hired his first HR professional and has grown from there. And so there's still a lot of that going on. Somebody
Right.
gets started up, yeah, that's a great thing, and they get moving. And first you're hiring people and then maybe friends of friends, and that's how a startup grows. And at some point it gets to be too much. Do you realize it in time? Do you need some help getting things set up? That's where I come in.
It's funny too. I feel like recruiting. You mentioned that you used the word necessity earlier, but it can also be a competitive advantage for companies that do it
Oh
properly.
yeah.
And it's a lot more
Oh
of a
yeah.
sophisticated process and practice than I feel like most people give credit to it. I mean, there's a lot of companies. It's all around metrics, KPIs, outreaches, the candidate experience, which we'll get into in a moment. But like it's literally gone from this just kind of, oh, it's recruiting, it's talent acquisition, whatever, to now it's literally a company's competitive advantage, the way that they're going to propel themselves, faster and further than a lot of their competitors. And it's a missed opportunity if companies don't have a keen eye on creating kind of a better experience and a more efficient process.
Well, there's no question about it. I mean, the simplest component of that is that the more efficient you are, the less time the job is vacant,
Yeah.
and the more focused you are on who you recruit, the less replacements that you have to do. So all those things tie together. Your point is absolutely valid. Companies that focus on this, not to the exclusion of everything else, they focus on this to get it right. It really does provide a competitive advantage. You have better productivity. You have better retention. Presumably, you have happier employees, which
Right.
all leads to a better work environment. It's surprising, as I say that, it's surprising how many companies recruit badly, in spite of the fact that it has so much of an impact on how you can function as an organization.
The implications are huge, and it can also create a slog. I mean, the example you mentioned earlier about the CEO having 13 interviews over the course of the week, like that seems
Yeah,
to me like a pretty negligent use of time, to be
yeah,
honest with
exactly.
you. So, but we can get that a little bit later. One of the first question I really have for you is in regards to kind of state of the union for the recruiting space.
Yeah.
Why is it so difficult? I mean, I have conversations with other recruiters, weekly, and everyone's talking about how ever since COVID, it's been this slog, and then kind of companies started to over-index and overhire once we realized COVID wasn't going away. Then we had a hiring frenzy, and now we seem like we're slowing down a little bit more. Like, what is going on, and why is it so difficult to recruit and find good people?
Well, there's several things there. The how we react to what goes on in the economy is different every time we do it, right? And I think you described it well in terms of, you know, over indexing in either direction. The company that I was working for just before COVID hit had a fairly significant 60% reduction in revenue. This is public
Wow.
knowledge. I'm not sharing any secrets. And so about that many of us were let go. And then, as you say, 3 to 4 months later, people realize we're in this for the long haul, but the economy's starting to come back in some places.
Right.
Well, all those resources have gone off and to do something else. So the things that are impacting the industry right now is one, the oversized demand, which we hear about every time we hear the employment numbers, and two, the fact that there were a lot of people who left recruiting, and so there's a smaller pool to pull from, and so companies having to be a little bit more creative in terms of how they hire. And then the third thing that you touched on, why is it so difficult to hire? Well, we know that there aren't enough people to fill all the jobs that are available, and let's be honest that there's like a 5 or 6 million headcount gap between available people and how many jobs are open. Now, some of that is early retirement, some of that is people who've decided they're not going to work again, and a lot of that are jobs that not everybody wants. And so the jobs that are in demand, there still are um, there there's a fight to get the right kind of people. And how are they getting the word out? Then there's the whole process of how they're recruiting. There's so many different channels these days. Are you advertising on your website? Are you advertising on social media? Are you actively looking? Are you working passively? Are you maybe using some of the AI tools to help you find people? There are a lot of those kind of alternatives. I talked to a CEO 6 or 8 weeks ago. He was looking for a chief operating officer, and he posted, he said, look, I'm startup. I don't know whether this is a part-time job or a full-time job. He got 1,000 applicants for that COO job. And there are 3 people in the company besides the CEO. This was his next important hire, and he got 1,000 applicants.
Oh,
So how are you going to go through that? If you're a recruiting organization, you got 1,000 applicants. Well, hopefully you've got some technology to help you. But the reality is that you can be buried, or it had another company. They we're only averaging about 1.8 applicants per requisition, which is pretty low. They were interviewing 9 people, but they were only getting 1.8. And so they couldn't figure out, well, why are we falling behind? Why are there more jobs, more jobs? Well, it's because you're not getting the number of applicants that you need, and you're interviewing too many people. You're too picky. And so what ends up happening? Your jobs stay open longer. What's more important? Somebody who's not quite perfect, or having the job vacant? And you talked about the metrics that people look at. Are you looking at the right metrics to tell you what's going on with your recruiting process? So I mean, stories, yeah, a lot of stories, but often goes back to, people are running, and they're trying to, well, no, let me change the analogy. People are trying to change their tire while the car's moving.
Sure.
Yeah, I get it.
No, agreed. And I like kind of the information you shared about the job boards. And I want to table that discussion for a little bit, because I think that's super important, because there's been just an influx of job boards, an influx of interest in job boards, and just to kind of pile on an interest in not using recruiters because people are trying to leverage job boards. So let's table that for a minute. One thing I want to talk about is the candidate experience, right? So a few moments ago, we talked about the recruiting space and how it's quite difficult to hire, which I think is a great segue into the candidate experience. Because to me, and I'm in the industry reluctantly myself, 5.5 years, I feel like the candidate experience is a way that companies can differentiate themselves from other companies, and maybe not necessarily be more efficient at hiring, but do a better job with hiring, right? Find the right people. So let's talk a little bit about the candidate experience, and what does that mean to you, and how is that a competitive advantage for companies that are actually have a keen eye on increasing that focus?
Candidate experience is just what it sounds like. It's, as a candidate, how do you experience the opportunity of going to work for a company? And observationally, which is to say you listen to the stories, you read what people say online, candidate experience right now is pretty abysmal, which is surprising in an era when candidates are still in such high demand.
Well, and companies are saying we value our employees.
We value our employees. Well, see, they value the employees, but they don't value the job seeker, right?
Yeah,
it's
the employees, the candidates.
That's right. And so, if you have a lousy experience, they don't communicate with you. When they do, it's superficial. It's long gaps of dead silence. What does that create in your mind about what it's going to be like to be an employee when you get there? So people come in pissed off. Yeah, I took the job because it's what they offered, but they're not going to get anything out of me. It is an interesting time, driven I think by a couple things. One is, you touched on technology, and sometimes we rely too much on technology to help with the decisions. Is the technology making the right decisions? There was one study done out of Harvard that 26 million people a year are rejected by the technology before they're even looked at by people who could otherwise have been qualified. It's some little glitch in their resume or something, so over-reliance on technology is something you have to be careful of. The other is, if you're shorthanded in recruiting and your recruiters are handling 50 recs apiece, or you've got the chief executive officer doing the recruiting, they're not going to follow through and have the same sort of impact on it. Now, studies show you how important the candidate experience is, because not everybody that you talk to is going to be hired, right? And so if you're treating that person badly, are you a consumer brand? And what is that going to say about your potential with that person? There's actually an award. It's called the CANDY Award, CANDE, CANDY Awards, and it's candidate experience. And every year if you choose to, it's a voluntary thing. And it's a really extensive self-audit process that you go through, and then you submit it, and the people are chosen. And, the people who win it are ones that you would expect to, because they've got such a well-known brand, and they're known for, so it's, the consumer brands, the airlines, the hotels, those kinds of folks are very often the winners. Although sometimes, an industrial company will get in there, or somebody that isn't particularly a consumer brand, but really recognizes the value of treating their employees right. it's kind of ironic that before COVID, say 2019, we were, as an industry, very concerned about the candidate experience, and there was a lot of conversation around, as we were starting to taper off from the old war for talent routine, right? But still, candidates were in high demand, and so people were really interested in doing a good job with the candidates. Well, we seem to have forgotten all that. It seemed to have gone all out the window, and it's going to take some time to come back in. Yet, the whole ghosting aspect. People wonder, well, why do candidates ghost me? Well, they ghost you because they've been ghosted. I talked to one executive who had applied to 300 jobs, C-level jobs, and gotten 10 rejections and one interview. Now, it's possible this person wasn't qualified for anything, but that doesn't explain the fact that they didn't hear from the other 289.
No, I think it's a great point, and I want to touch on something you brought up earlier about kind of like the reputation in the marketplace, consumer brand or not consumer brand. I feel
Yeah,
like poor candidate experience can affect somebody, a company's brand equity.
absolutely.
Ghosting people if you don't have a good feedback loop, et cetera. I mean, people want to know why they don't get jobs, especially the ambitious folks want to know why they don't get jobs so they can do better next time
Yeah,
and,
right.
and get a hold of those skill sets. And so candidly, when I work with companies, a non-negotiable for me is, I need to have feedback within 24 to 48 hours max. Anything more than that, you're making my job almost impossible because to your
Yeah,
point, people take that as indicative as to how it's going to be in the work environment. So take a sales, you know, uh, opening as an example. A good salesperson is going to think, hey, we need to be able to deliver. We need to be able to get back to clients, et cetera. And if you can't even have your own company get back to you and provide feedback, provide you an offer, provide guidance as to where you stand, how are they going to do a good job in the sales process, right? So I feel
yeah,
like your point, a lot of people do take it as indicative. If this company's bad at getting back to me, what's it going to be like to actually work for them? And
right.
candidly, that would be the first thing that I would look at when interviewing with a company is do they ghost you? Do they get back to you? And do they get back to you with good information or bad information? Because to me, you should be closing the loop regardless of whether or not it's, hey, let's move forward, or sorry, you're not the right fit.
Yeah, and it's such a simple thing to reach out, and it is, people, the challenge is, I'm not looking to make an excuse for folks. People don't like to deliver bad news, and sometimes bad news is not well received,
Correct.
and it's still, it seems to me, having worked on the service side of the recruiting industry for so many years, that it's almost an obligation, in terms of somebody has invested their time to show their interest and to go through your process. Don't you have an obligation to them to let them know where they stand? You can tell, I think, again, talking to job seekers, you can tell when you're dealing with a company that's got outsourced recruiting. It's a different experience because they're probably properly staffed, and they're following a process, and likely there is a concern for that employer brand, which is being enforced on them by their the company that's hired them. And a lot of companies, they don't seem to follow that, and it's their loss, right? Because the next company that does is going to pick up the hard to find candidate, and is going to have the reputation, whether it's on Glassdoor or Yelp, or you pick a rating site. People look at those things.
People absolutely look at those things, and people also share. They're more inclined. I don't know what the stat is, but they're more inclined to share a bad experience than they are a good
I
experience.
think it's 10 to 1.
Okay,
It's 10
that's
to 1.
staggering. That's
Yeah,
staggering.
we're more happy to complain than we are to praise.
Yeah, it's funny too. It kind of, I'm in the headhunting space myself, and like, I won't work with companies that have a poor, candidate experience or poor footprint. And that's not because I'm opportunistic, but it's because I want my brand to work in concert with a company that actually cares about potential employees and the
Yeah,
candidate. To
right.
me, it's very, very important. I by no means am perfect, but I make it a point to try to let every single person know if they're in or out in the process and why. And to me, that's really important. That's just table stakes. And you know what? At the end of the day, Michael, it's just good manners too.
Absolutely. It's so simple, and the argument you get is the time that it takes and so on and so forth. Well, it you can point to the studies that show that it pays itself back in terms of employee engagement, employee retention, and also, as you pointed out, your reputation in the marketplace. It's so short-sighted not to think about those things.
I've actually gotten more business and more referrals, candidly, from
Yeah.
candidates that did not get through the process, but they appreciated how like I kept them informed throughout the entire process. I found a channel that worked for them, be it text, be it email, be it call, was very transparent, and I didn't like not again. I'm not pat myself on the back, but it's like I didn't represent the client or the candidate. I was this kind of intermediary that was in the middle and worked with both parties. And I've gotten more business over the last 3 years just because of a good candidate experience from people that referred me into their new customers. They're
Yeah,
like,
that's it.
seem
That's it.
honest, seem like you have integrity. I want to bring you into my organization now. And it's staggering how there's such a profound effect by just being a good human, closing the loop and keeping people up to speed with how they're progressing or not.
Yeah, it's we go through these ebbs and flows, and we'll see how it sorts itself out. There are a lot of things that people are struggling with between the Great Resignation and quiet quitting, and just general shortage of workers.
Right. Well,
Some of them we exacerbate, right? That's the unfortunate thing. Somehow we make it harder for ourselves.
yeah, well, quiet quitting to me is just a ridiculous premise. But that's probably a topic for another day.
Well, yeah, it's a Gallup poll yesterday. 51% of the people surveyed said that they're engaging in quiet quitting.
I just couldn't.
That's pretty staggering. And to me, it means you hired me for 40 hours a week. That's about what I'm going to work.
Right.
Now, is that quitting? I think we've overblown. But you're right. That's a whole nother topic.
True. I mean, but in that vein, then yes, you're doing what you get paid for, and then
Yeah.
everything
Yeah.
else is my time, right?
Right. Exactly.
So we talked about candidate experience. I feel like we get some folks some actionable insights into maybe what they can do to increase those. I mean, namely feedback loop, not ghosting people, being transparent, being open, and I think one thing we didn't really talk about, but it's setting clear expectations. Um,
Yes.
that's all good stuff. But let's talk about kind of the company side of the equation. Let's talk about recruiting and what a company can maybe do tomorrow to have a better just recruiting footprint. And I'm sure we'll tie that back to the candidate experience. But what can they be doing? I mean, is it job ads? Is it leveraging kind of their employee network and having them as folks that kind of go out into the market and try to kind of bring in you know friends or ex colleagues? Like, what can a company do that's really struggling right now with recruiting?
One of the first things that I think about, and this is something that one of my colleagues has been advocating for a while. We often think that recruiting starts with posting a job. Why doesn't recruiting start with first looking at people that you've looked at in the past and see if any of them are suitable? And then go to referrals, then ask your internal folks, ask your network who you've got, and then finally go to posting.
Yeah,
You've got these ready pools, and they may be people that you looked at. Maybe they weren't a B player, call them a silver medalist, because somebody had just the right combination of things, or there was a money issue or something. It wasn't related to skills. You've got these people that you've looked at. You've invested money to attract them in the first place. Why not go back and review those a second time? And then referrals are gold, because you don't. Somebody who's being referred in is likely being prepped for what to expect, and so you're dealing with somebody who's sort of a warm lead. Why aren't you using that? And then if you can't find anybody there,
but there's also the reputation aspect. Like, I'm not
yeah,
going to want to refer somebody that I feel would do a poor job.
exactly.
It's almost like this added layer of validity that whom you're bringing to the table is going to be a step in the right direction.
And would you refer somebody to a company if you thought it was a bad place to work?
Right. No.
So it's a win-win in the referral space. And then if you can't find anybody, then post it and work quickly through the people you find, because posting, you're going to get good and mediocre and somewhere in the middle. Just work through it quickly and make a decision. And all too often, where companies get caught is they get caught in this endless cycle. They're recruiting. They're looking at too many people. If you're looking at more than 4 or 5 people, you probably don't know what you're looking for.
I love this. Yes.
A nine. At one company that they were really concerned because they went from 39 average applicants per job down to 19. Well, what are you concerned about? Did you want to say no to another 21 people that you didn't say no to before? My buddy, who's a data analyst, said to me the other day. He said, I have never seen stats to tell me how good the person I didn't hire is compared to the person that I did. And you think about that because there's this whole regret thing. Well, I didn't have enough candidates. How do you know you didn't have enough candidates?
Right.
How do you know that the people that you didn't look at because you didn't look at them were actually better than the person that you hired? Do a good job hiring in the first place. Have a reasonable process that you go through. Understand the kind of questions that you're asking. There's some fundamental things that say, as an outsourcing firm, we encouraged customers to look at no more than 3 to 5 people.
100%.
Because of the time it took. And if we're not bringing the right people to the table, that's a challenge. I get that. And if nobody is matching it, what does that say about the hiring manager's decision process in terms of what they're looking for?
No, I totally agree. So a couple of things from the search side of the house. You mentioned the referral network, as a company, and that's what I do as well, just so you know. So the first thing I do when we get a new job is I'll look within my network, find my trusted folks, reach out to them and have a conversation and see if we can find somebody maybe in kind of this trusted circle. So I think that's super, super important in an area I focus. Another point that I want to kind of underscore that you mentioned a few moments ago about 3 to 5 candidates. Our goal is typically 1 to 3 candidates. And what I tell clients is that, anything over 5, as an example, either we did a bad job during discovery because we didn't understand what you guys needed. You guys were not completely transparent with us or did a poor job sharing information about what it's really like with the company, or C, there's something else going on entirely that we need to, look at.
Yeah.
That's really, in my experience, what I found. And when I've worked with clients that are very, very open, transparent, honest, and we can have a dedicated 45-minute to an hour discovery session with the leadership team, we literally will provide 1 to 3 candidates. Like our job gets markedly easier the more time we can spend with a team, because that's what it's all about. It's about information. Receiving information, disseminating information, and being able to represent the customer, appropriately. And if you can't even represent yourself appropriately, you're dead in the water.
Yeah, all too often it's either not taking the time to have that discovery conversation, which does happen, particularly with internal recruiters.
Right.
Oh, you know how to handle this. Here's, and then they come back and well, no, I want this, or no, I want that. Or as you say, I don't choose to believe that it's a lack of honesty about what it is that they want. Yeah. It's lack of clarity to what they want. And so what they're doing is they're putting the job on the recruiter to bring candidates to the table that they can react to. And then, oh no, I don't want this, I don't want that, or I do want this, or I do want that, instead of doing that thinking in advance. I mean, it's like manufacturing, right? Where's the best time to correct the errors in the manufacturing process? Well, before they happen.
Yeah, measure twice, cut once. Right?
Yes, exactly. No, I mean, there's some logic to these things but again, people moving so fast, they think they have to move fast. You're doing yourself trouble.
Like their own internal recruiting team, if the hiring manager is not giving the recruiting team clear and concise direction, they're not going to do a good job.
No, they're not.
You may get lucky here and there, but if you can't aptly represent your own organization or the wants and needs of a division, you're never going to find the right person.
Well, if you've got that rare recruiter who could read minds, then maybe you're okay.
Exactly. So let's talk about, we got two more items here, Michael, and I really appreciate your time. So a lot of buzz around passive and active candidates. I have my opinion, which I'll share here in a few moments, but what's your opinion? Is a passive candidate or an active candidate? Is one better than the other? Are both kind of, equal in certain circumstances? Like, what companies really be looking for in this day and age?
Well, as you might imagine, there are pros and cons to both. Active candidates, of which there are a lot, right? As we're in the environment of the Great Resignation, active candidates often overrepresent what they're capable of. And so I think you'll find, which is, hence my suggestion about how you approach when you're going to fill a job. When you open it up and you're asking for active candidates to come in and apply, you're going to get a lot of people. I'll just give you an example. I was filling a sales job for a company I was working with, and it was SaaS, and it was particularly in the recruiting space, HR tech. All of this was very clear in the job description. We get 293 applicants over the course of a week. We were using a tool to evaluate the candidates so we could do it on a consistent basis. And the most qualified candidate had been selling gardening services nationally for the last 9 years.
Right.
No SaaS, no HR tech. That was the most qualified candidate. It's not. So that's the challenge you get with active, right? You get whoever's looking for a job. On the other hand, passive candidates are harder to get.
Yes.
You've got to go and dig for them. And are those passive candidates, by their nature, passive candidates are not actively looking for a job. Doesn't mean that you can't entice them to come work for you, although you should be able to work with a much shorter list. So that goes back to your idea of putting it out to that trusted circle. Well, I know so-and-so, they're pretty happy, and they might consider an offer. And I think that the stats again show that a surprising number of job applicants, of people in working today, are willing to listen to an offer today, because even if they're not actively looking, people are looking. They're looking for things to do that are different. So there's a work effort is the key difference, and then the trade-off is you might get more active applicants, but you're less likely to find quality. Passive, much smaller number, and it's going to require some digging to get to them.
I think that's an excellent point. And I really liked what you kind of mentioned about the active candidates maybe kind of overemphasizing their skill set because they're so active, they're so interested in moving on. Like they've made up their mind, maybe they've left, maybe they were laid off, but they've made up their mind that they're leaving. And so I have seen they have maybe there could be an overemphasis on their skill set. What I've also found is that they're at a higher risk for flight risk. So they're so active that they're trying to kind of take a role that only hits 7 of the 10 boxes versus 8 or 9 or 10. Then they get in, they try it, and they want to leave because it just wasn't the right fit because they were active and they're kind of desperate maybe to get out of their situation. Passive on the other side, which is candidly what I prefer to work with. I feel like the style and the conversations are different because they don't really need me.
Yeah.
I kind of need them a little bit, but they're have a wait and see approach. Like, hey, I'll talk to you, but like I'm in a good spot, and so this role has really got to line up a certain way for me to really kind of change my position from all right, I'm listening, now we're talking. And to your point, it is a smaller network, so it's tougher. But in my experience, the quality occasion could be a little tighter.
Yeah, I think I would say the fit is more likely better because you're looking at somebody before you're talking to them.
Right.
And then just to add on to your point about the flight risk, active candidates are very often looking at more than one job.
Right.
And so this is where ghosting comes in. You could be really hot on one person and they could have 3 other things that they're working on, and A, you might never hear from them again, or B, you pitch an offer and they say, yeah, no thanks, because I got this other offer. So there's a speed to market issue with active versus passive, particularly at the more senior levels, maybe not quite so much, but particularly at sort of the middle and the lower levels. As you say, those folks are going to take the job that comes along because they're looking for the dollars, or they're looking for the stability, or they're looking for replacement right in the moment.
Agreed. And pro tip for anybody listening, if you're getting ghosted on either side of the equation, probably not the right fit.
Yeah.
So moving on, last question for you. And Michael, thanks so much for your time. So job boards, we kind of talked about this earlier. I'm not a huge fan of job boards. Candidly, I don't post any jobs at all. Everything we do is direct touch going out into the market, but they do have a place, like maybe smaller organizations, that don't have maybe the purse strings to hire a recruiter. Maybe it's a, multinational corporation that's got so many jobs that they basically need to cast a wide net.
Yep.
What says you? What are your thoughts on job boards? Is there a time and a place where they work, and are they a good replacement also for firms such as mine?
So I think that yes, there's absolutely a place for them, and you hit on a couple of them. One is the small firm that doesn't have a way to get the word out there, and or another is just the sheer volume. I worked with one client, and everything was posted online because they had such a market presence in their space that we were bringing in close to 1.5 million applicants a month
Oh my gosh.
without, well, it's, big company, but without having to do any real advertising, right? Other than for certain niche jobs. There were certain niche jobs that you had to do some advertising for. You needed a particular skill set. So I think they definitely have a place in what you're doing, recognizing that a job board is generally going to bring you the active candidates. It's not going to bring you the passive candidates just by definition. If somebody's passive, they're not looking for a job. So you're going to miss those kind of folks, and it is a necessary piece of the equation. Now, what's interesting now, as opposed to say 7 or 8 years ago, is that we've sort of blended job boards and social, because there's Indeed or Monster, but then there's LinkedIn. Is LinkedIn a job board? Well, it functions as a job board, but it's a little bit different. There's Facebook, or there's Craigslist.
Mhm.
So really it's understanding based on the persona of the candidate that you're looking for. Where are they going to be hanging out? Where are you most likely to find them? And so the mistake that a lot of companies make is, you talked about the wide net. I totally get your metaphor there. And are you throwing too wide a net? Are you throwing the net in the right part of the ocean? Let's think about that. You want to catch salmon, and you're throwing the net off the shores of Hawaii. You're not going to catch very many salmon. I'm sorry. It's just that's all I know about fishing, so I'm not going to go any further than that. Are you posting jobs when you do, where the people that you're looking to hire are likely to see them and likely to be interested in them? And then that comes to the whole concept of posting in and of itself. All too often, still, a job post is a description of the job. Well, okay, that's great. Why should I be interested in it?
Right.
That doesn't come into the job posting. So there's a whole industry around writing better job postings where it's really marketing, right? It's a sales pitch
Yeah.
around the job. You're doing it verbally and through your network, so you're doing it sort of intuitively, and it can make a dramatic difference in both the quality and quantity of applicants you get, depending on how it's written. And on one level, it could be written such that people of certain demographics aren't interested.
Right.
Maybe it's a pronoun issue, or maybe it's a description of the work environment. There are all these kinds of things that can come into how much do you want to think about getting the right people to come work for you. And I would argue that the more you think about it, the more those dividends are going to pay off in the long run. Yeah, it's going to take some time at the front end, and not as much time as you're going to be doing with replacements. It's as simple
So,
as that.
oh, totally agreed. I want to kind of highlight a couple of the points there. First and foremost, what I tell people a lot of times, like, job ads, it's a leg to the stool. It's not the stool, right? It needs to, if you're going to use one, it needs to be part of the equation. Maybe
Yep.
it's coupled with digital. But to your point, if you're not finding the proper channel, then it's all for naught anyways. It
Yeah.
doesn't even
Right.
matter. Are your people on Facebook? Are your people on LinkedIn? Are they on Indeed? And companies need to do their due diligence and find out where their ideal candidate is. And that's if they're going to use a job ad or advertise. Then, in my opinion, it sounds like you kind of agree with that sentiment. You need to find the proper channel.
Yeah. Right.
Those are
Exactly.
after. Also, too, with job ads, what I found is that, again, they may be good for getting a mass of folks in, but you can also may get a mass of unqualified candidates. Whereas you get 1,000 candidates, I think, to an example you used earlier, and then like 1% are qualified, and chances are very high that you're going to lose that 1% because you're going to
That's exactly right.
through
Yeah.
the applicants. So I think I posted 2 job ads in my life, and I got 400 or 500 applicants per each, and I found one qualified candidate out of each pool. And I was like, for my business personally, not a good fit.
Right.
There are definitely scenarios where job ads make sense. I think it needs to be tied back to visuals and like finding that right channel. And then last point, you mentioned kind of about the copy. And like, sales ad essentially is what this is. It's a glorified sales ad, in my opinion,
Hmm.
right? You're selling somebody as to kind of how to work with your company. I do the same thing with my business. When I'm having conversations with prospective clients, we sit down and during our discovery session, we create a persona, and then I
Right.
create a value statement that ties back to that persona and says, hey, this is, who we're looking for. This is what you're going to be doing. And this is why you'd be delighted to work here. Right. I mean, it's obviously written a little bit different than that, but that's the whole point, is creating a message that's going to resonate with your target market. And all starts with kind of creating the persona. You need to know who this person is, where they're going to be, and then that's the only way that you can resonate.
We are in complete sync on that, and yeah, it is a little more work, and it pays off in the end because you're getting a better fit, which means you're looking at less people,
Right.
and the people you bring in are likely going to last longer.
Exactly.
Those are all good things in the
Those are
end, and
fantastic.
it's not hard to show an ROI to that. It's not. It's just you just take the time, and you're going to get the quality you need, and you're going to be better off for it. But
Agreed.
ooh,
And
we
also,
get
that's the
caught.
problem the other days. You get them in the system. How do you retain them? Right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly,
Well, Michael, hey,
exactly.
real pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on. Where can people find you and
Yeah.
find out more about kind of the things that you're up to?
So there are a couple of places that I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Mike Yinger, just search for me. You'll find my LinkedIn page. My company is Customer Solutions Incorporated. That's on LinkedIn and Facebook, and also on the web at custsol, CUSTSOL.com. And you can email me, Michael at custsol.com. Happy to chat and see how we can make the recruiting experience better for everybody.
Awesome. We'll be sure to post it on the video. So again, Michael, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. This was great.
Great, thanks, Bo. I enjoyed the conversation.